Welcome back, everyone. It is 5/14 of 2015. We're going to continue with Lacocque, his introductory comments on the context of the creation narratives. And he basically wants us to get away from that American, Greek, German, Western thought environment and thought structure, and to at least begin to enter into a Hebrew framework of thinking, and to look at the creation narratives from a Hebrew point of view. So we've only gone a few pages into his introduction, but he's simply trying to get us to reshape the framework within which we understand the creation narratives, and to take it up from a Hebrew point of view. So he wants to continue that. He wants to discuss the birth of the ethical. It's going to continue along the same lines, and we'll take a look at the three moments. We're going to begin with vulnerability and the eschatology of the ethical that begins in the creation narratives. And he says that basically we look at the holding in check of chaos, which was kept in check by the free gift of God. That's what the mythological aspect of the creation narrative gave us, that confrontation between the creative order and the chaos that needed to be defeated. And Lacocque points out that death, like chaos, was kept in check by God's gift, but there was a gift that could be withdrawn at any time according to God's will, so that even in paradise, life was not to be taken for granted. Life in paradise was a gift of chaos and death being kept in check. Later, Leviathan even becomes replaced by the concept of death. Now, the truth of the creation narrative initially points out that the creation is eschatological. The creation of humanity is one that has an eschatological goal of eventually leading to the existence of humanity without the persistent will toward evil. So the goal is to create and lead humanity to becoming a mature, spiritually matured humanity that no longer possesses that persistent will to evil. So the creation narrative is not descriptive. It is eschatological vision, according to Lacocque. And creation was initially vulnerable to chaos and frailty, but its eschatological perfection is a goal that is being worked out by the free gift of God and the salvation history. We move next to that eating of the fruit of knowledge, and we end up with that blurred vision of the ethical. The eating of the fruit creates a criterion of judgment which becomes just based on human ego, and what takes place here is a passage to new understanding of reality by humanity. But we learn that good and evil were originally kept in harmony by God in a complementarity. In the eating of the fruit, humanity acquires the category of the ethical for the first time, but it creates a tension within good and evil that previously didn't exist. Now there's just very strong existential tension between good and evil in the realm of the ethical, all brought on about through human rebellion. So we end up with an eventual sign of this eating of the fruit creating a neutralization of human trust in God as this new human ego and vision of their own human criterion of judgment comes to surface. Now the Genesis 3:22 passage is brought up because it's had some difficult interpretation, where God says, "Just don't let them live forever. They've become like gods. Just don't let them live forever." But with this, within Hebrew tradition, it's simply God desiring that the non-perpetuation of this confused vision, it must be halted because it disrupts the eschatological purpose of creation for humanity. This confused vision, which has emerged in humanity, must be prevented from being eternally perpetuated. Now, obviously the middle accounts of creation, we had the Genesis 1 mythological, the wisdom literature historical. In between, you have Genesis 2 and 3 that combine myth and history. Adam and Eve together represent humanity. The serpent represents the seduction of ourselves by ourselves. It's existential seduction, which is projected onto a seductive object in external reality. Therefore, the passive aspect of temptation hovers on the border between outer and inner. It's not purely inner, it's not purely outer. The serpent becomes the internal seduction of humanity by humanity itself, or the external, where evil is already existing in objective reality, the world we live in. But it's very much not just a clear-cut, evil force, evil personality in the external world. It is also the existential, self-deluding aspect of our own nature to create within ourselves this seduction of a blurred vision. So it leads to the realm of the ethical as a revelation of a benediction through suffering. The ethic eventually evolves to the eschatological Abrahamic covenant of promise. And his covenant is the antidote to the shame of that blurred ethic of the creation narrative of the rebellion by humanity. It's the antidote of love. It's exemplified in Abraham's intervening for Sodom. The covenant includes the commandment to love God and to love our fellow humanity in Deuteronomy 6:5. So love becomes the antidote of the shame of this self-delusion and blurred vision. God decides that the benediction and the fulfillment of the purpose of the intended purpose of creation will blossom, but through suffering and struggle and woe. So and that's in Isaiah 26. But it will be an evolving eschatological vision for creation and for humanity that will unfold in a struggle. It will be an unfolding which is a struggle as an unfolding to keep this chaos in check, to keep this self-delusion in check. And so, again, we're taking this in very small bites of just 10 pages each. We've really only looked at 30 pages of the entire introduction, so a very brief look here, but you can see that Lacocque is simply trying to frame our mind to understand that we don't always need to think as American, we don't always need to think as German or Western or Greek, but think as Hebrew, think within the Judaic faith and reevaluate your interpretation of the creation narratives based on a Hebrew perspective rather than a Greek Western perspective. And then also realize that myth and history are always in tension. They're always being kind of pulled on each other, and that the existential is certainly a very prevalent teaching in the creation narrative, but there's also the emergence of what's going to become later the future historical teaching of the wisdom literature. So those two are held together, but we are to understand that the serpent is in many instances speaking of the serpent of delusion, self-delusion within us, which we are, of course, confronted with daily in our own lives, daily as human beings. We always have to counter doubt, self-delusion, and challenges to our faith and what we believe, but a lot of times that's brought on by our own internal serpent, our own internal self-delusion or blurred vision, which Isaiah says is only corrected by the Anointed One, who brings sight to those who are blind and corrects this blurred vision. So it's a very brief look. We only picked up another 10 pages of the introduction, but Lacocque is preparing us for the Lacocque Ricoeur dialogue, and he wants to do that by essentially saying at the very beginning of the text, at the very beginning of their work together, first, please, as a participant, take up the Hebrew Abrahamic perspective, the Jewish perspective of the Abrahamic covenant, which is a covenant of an antidote of love to counter the evolving existential shame that is narrated in the creation narratives as a very strong existential truth, which is always tensioned against the myth of the early creation narrative. And so Lacocque is keeping us on that path, and we'll continue the next lesson with another small portion so that we can just kind of cover key points as we go and really internalize this new framework of perspective for understanding the creation in the Hebrew text. And that'll wrap up the birth of the ethical, and we'll take it up again next lesson.